All right, good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with a blockbuster day of news. The Supreme Court, for the third time, rejected an attempt to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And at last, federal recognition of Independence Day for Black Americans. President Biden signing into law the Juneteenth federal holiday, commemorating the day in 1865 when all Black Americans were officially free from slavery. But we begin tonight with a new lost cause: the Republican Party's whitewashing of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, as the GOP deepens its commitment to a revisionist history of the deadly insurrection. It's impossible to overlook the parallels to another insidious effort to mythologize a seditious undertaking: the lost cause of the Confederacy in the years following the Civil War, and the twisted logic and outright lies that laid the groundwork for the revisionist history found in American textbooks for generations, pushed by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. In 1920, the UCD historian General Mildred Rutherford published a pamphlet, a measuring rod, to test textbooks and reference books for schools. In it, she warned to reject books that don't acknowledge, quote, interference with the South's rights as the cause, and ones that label Confederate soldiers as traitors and rebels, or call it a rebellion. Rutherford also advocated rejecting books saying the war was fought over keeping Black people enslaved, or speaking of enslavers as cruel or unjust. And there was the denial of the original American domestic terror organization, the Ku Klux Klan. As the New Republic noted, as the KKK terrorized and lynched Black people throughout the South during Reconstruction, politicians denied the group even existed and argued that whites were the true victims. The same kind of denial and deflection, and call them what they are, lies, that Republicans have peddled that you've already heard time and time again.
It was Trump supporters who lost their lives that day, not Trump supporters who were taking the lives of others.
There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie. If you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit.
Except they've become so brazen that they're just saying the quiet part out loud now, like they were fake Trump supporters, according to Wisconsin Republican Ron Johnson.
I think it's extremely important to create an accurate historical record of exactly what happened so the false narrative of thousands of armed insurrectionists doesn't last.
Standing firmly in the way of the propaganda, the very law enforcement officials who bore the brunt of the siege, like Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone, who's speaking out about his interaction with Georgia Republican Andrew Clyde, seen here barricading himself in the House chamber during what he says was a normal tourist day. Clyde refused to shake hands with Fanone, who was beaten and tased that day. Clyde was also one of the 21 House Republicans who voted against awarding congressional gold medals to first responders, including Capitol Police. And tonight, the Justice Department released body camera footage in the case against former Marine and retired NYPD officer Thomas Webster, who prosecutors previously alleged wore a bulletproof vest and attacked a Capitol Police officer. Webster can be seen in a red jacket in the video, released at the media's request. And we should warn you, it's disturbing to watch. Wow, that's some aggressive tourism. Joining me now is Jason Johnson, professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University, and Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large for The Bulwark and an MSNBC columnist. And Jason, I'm going to go to you on this first. You know, this morning, as I was preparing to chat with my wonderful executive producer, Tina, for our sort of daily morning call, it just was, it just was hitting me as I'm thinking, where have we seen this narrative before? where you have an insurrection against the United States government that then is attempted to be covered up by the people who did it and the people who support them and the politicians who support them by either saying it didn't happen, it wasn't so bad, it was actually positive. It's literally a replay in a lot of ways of what happened after the U.S. Civil War, what Republicans are doing now. What do you make of that analogy?
I'm sorry.
Oh, do we have you, Jason? Do I have you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go to Charlie. Charlie, I'm going to throw the same question to you because it is interesting to watch kind of the same thing happen centuries later.
Except that we saw this in real time. We know what happened, and it just happened a couple of months ago. I mean, we've talked a lot about living in a post-truth world, but this is the annihilation of truth. And watching Republicans revising the history, dropping this down the memory hole is really extraordinary because it's either, a normal tourist day, or it was an Antifa false flag, or maybe it was the FBI. What do they believe? Or do they believe it all at the same time? I saw that you retweeted. I had a quote from Hannah Arendt, who's written about this. She said, there gets to be a point in authoritarian, totalitarian regimes where the truth has been so battered that people are prepared to believe that everything is possible, nothing is true. And so they're prepared to believe everything and nothing. And that's what we're seeing here. And the one through line that really strikes me as we look at what's been happening is this through line of nihilism, that you have a political party that is prepared to erase an election, deny the results of an election, revise history, erase the truth, and then continues to move ahead as if nothing has ever happened. And that's why the videotape that you just played is so important. This is what happened. The denial is truly extraordinary. I won't say that it's unprecedented, but we live in a world in which to have politicians like Ron Johnson and others say that this was just a normal, walk in the park, requires people to basically shut down every one of their critical sensibilities. So your historical analogy is interesting, but I think we're seeing something that we've never actually experienced in real time like this.
Well, and the difference being, Jason, that at least in the case of the Civil War, it was after Reconstruction crumbled, right? That's many decades later. In this case, they're literally like 6 months later, they're going to pretend it didn't happen. Let's play that video again as we talk about this with you, Jason. In the case of this denial, not only do you have video that we all watch live, and now we're getting more and more video. This is new video that's come out. You also have all the indictments in which the people who did this are saying, I went there for Trump. Trump lied to me. I did this for him. They are self-identifying as what they are. Your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, they're literally screaming about this. But I'm old enough to remember, as everybody else in the panel, this isn't new. Dick Cheney lied to America and said that there were weapons of mass destruction when there weren't any. And then when people would show video, you said there were weapons of mass, he would turn around. I mean, like, this kind of blatant lying by those who seek power is not new. It's not shocking. It's not unprecedented. What is dangerous about what's happening now is usually these are lies that had to do with something happening abroad. Usually these are lies that had to do with something that was apart from the American people. They're lying about something that is having a daily impact on every single person's life in America. That is what's so dangerous. And we have a party that is not only committed to the lie, because they've been committed to lies before, but they're committed to a lie that could result in people dying. That's what's dangerous. What Representative Clyde is doing, what Ron Johnson is doing, they are setting the groundwork for the next attempted coup that will result in someone being hurt, and then they're going to pretend that didn't happen too. I guess if the insurrectionists had gotten in and hung Mike Pence, they would have said, yeah, Antifa did it. But because they weren't able to get Mike Pence this time, I guess it was the FBI, false flag event.
Or they would have said he brought it on himself for not being loyal enough to Trump. I mean, but the worry here is that there's almost nothing that wouldn't be said. I mean, you have Madison Cawthorn out there essentially bigging up the Viet Cong at this point. It's the Republicans flipping everything they used to believe on their head. It's as if they were saying, well, maybe Al-Qaeda had a point. If anyone had said that after 9/11, you would have thought that they would need to be committed. But they're basically doing that. Let me play for you Officer Michael Fanone, because he, to me, has been the most compelling sort of, one of the most at least, but if not the most compelling sort of testimonies, because he's refusing to shut up and disappear, which is Nicole said earlier, Nicole Wallace said earlier, they want him to disappear. Here he is not disappearing. This was him talking this morning.
These lawmakers on Capitol Hill, they feel like they could say whatever they want and they're never going to be held accountable for those words. Well, you know, your words have consequences, Congressman. You're lying about what happened on January 6th. And I'm going to be there to confront anyone who lies about January 6th. And I'm not here to make this a political issue. It just so happens that one party is lying about, you know, what thousands of officers experienced that day on Capitol Hill. I'm going to confront anyone that lies about that day.
Charlie Sykes, you know, this morning, Adam Kinzinger, who ratified what happened and testified to it as well, a Republican, he said that that guy used to be a Republican, that he was more on the Republican side if he was political at all. How do Republicans think that they can get away with refusing to shake the hand of a police officer who protected them, of turning on police, of turning on everything they supposedly believed in? Do they think that's going to actually work in their districts? Does this Andy Clyde think that's going to be popular in Georgia? Is that possible, that those people hate police now because, well, they don't love Trump enough?
Well, I think what they're counting on is that people won't hear about it, that if you have a 24/7 diet of, say, Fox News, you may never hear that story. But I mean, 2 points. All of this just underlines how crucial it is to have an independent, bipartisan January 6th commission to get to the bottom of what happened and to flush out all these lies. That's number one. Number two, the hypocrisy of Republicans like Congressman Clyde, who have wrapped themselves in the Blue Lives Matter movement, who have made their support for first responders so central to their appeal, is just stunning and breathtaking. And it is going to be interesting whether or not they are held accountable for this, because you know that their big mantra is that Democrats hate police. They want to defund police. And here you have a political party that is turning its back on police officers who quite literally laid down their lives to protect their rear ends and will not even shake their hands. So it is the contempt, the personal contempt, that is so striking here, but in the context of a political party that has just abandoned law enforcement when it comes to this. And by the way, you mentioned Madison Cawthorn, Congress, one of the trolls who's now in Congress, talking about, under the Second Amendment, we can resist the federal government, and if you don't think that we can with small arms, what about the Viet Cong? This is the kind of rhetoric that I do think also people need to be held accountable for. Who does Congressman Cawthorn suggest that people shoot? More police officers, soldiers, Marines, Secret Service agents, elected officials. He's talking about the Viet Cong, who killed American soldiers and Marines as the model for what insurrectionists in this country might do to their own government. I mean, Joy, it's easy to get numbed, but there is nothing normal about this.
He named the Marines and the Army. He basically bigged them up and named the Marines and the Army as the people who got taken apart. Jason, Dino Badala has a great column out where he says that, we should just start talking about this as terrorism. I mean, it obviously is. But if that is the case, then that makes Republicans at this point terrorist sympathizers, because and willingly so.
Joy, I remember 4 years ago saying, at this time slot, 4 years ago, saying after Charlottesville that Donald Trump is a terrorist sympathizer. The way that he talked about what happened in Charlottesville was like, the guy's a terrorist sympathizer. And the Republican Party, which at that point was still somewhat divided on what happened in Charlottesville, has pretty much become hook, line, and sinker in favor of a white nationalist takeover of the country. These people are terrorists. They're terrorist sympathizers. They're trying to cover for them. So that part, I think, is really obvious. There are clowns out there. You've got your Marjorie Taylor Greens. I can't take anything that Madison Cawthorn does seriously because the man punches trees. It's a crazy viral video. I can't respect the man. There's a lot of crazy Republicans out there. But the issue is that the core of their party, their actual intellectual leadership, like Mitch McConnell, like Ted Cruz, they too are terrorist sympathizers. And they too are serious about empowering the kinds of outside organizations that one day want to take over this country and kill anyone who does not believe what they want to believe. So, yeah, I agree with Dean. We have to sound the alarm. The president has to take these people seriously. They have to be held accountable because they're not going to stop until they take over the country or die trying.
Yeah, and Mitch McConnell, because people like him are willing to suborn terrorism in exchange for power. Go back, everyone, and read the way that former Confederate soldiers behaved back then in the 1870s through the 1920s. It's exactly the same way that they're behaving now. Jason Johnson, Charlie Sykes, thank you very much.